Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Presence podcast. This is your host, Puja. Today's topic is a prickly one. It's probably the most prevalent of human afflictions. I have certainly engaged in my fair share of judgment of strangers and lovers alike, and I'm still afflicted. But what gave me pause and made me reflect on my behavior was how my heart and body felt when I judged others. I noticed that my heart felt small, closed, and constricted. And my body felt tense and rigid and uncomfortable. I didn't feel good about myself when I engaged in judgment, not necessarily with words, but often just with my thoughts. And I realized I was hurting myself when I held someone at arm's length, sitting on my mountain of sanctimony, looking down on another. And the way I have come to understand it and the way I explain it today to my students and clients is that when judgment enters the room, love leaves. It is impossible for love and judgment to coexist in the same space. In this episode, we're going to jump on the judgment train and explore how we judge, what causes us to judge, what are the consequences of judging, and what we can do to release judgment and allow love in. And I use love as an umbrella term because judgment can cause separation between us, and it prevents not only love from being present, but many other relationship-friendly qualities like empathy, compassion, respect, understanding, patience. And I want to add here that in general, we should have good judgment. We should be able to judge and evaluate people and situations correctly. We need to uphold our boundaries. But when we are being reckless with our judgment, when our judgment is directed at someone and it is not a fully cooked perspective, then we are shortchanging ourselves and the relationship and the person that we are in relationship with. And it behooves us to stop and reflect and ask ourselves if something needs to be different inside of us. And this process depends also on the type of relationship. Our relationships exist on a spectrum. On one hand, we have complete strangers that we encounter at airports or grocery stores. We might judge them for how they look or how they speak. Then we have our co-workers. We might judge them for how they show up and perform. And then we have our more intimate relationships with our loved ones, our family, our friends, our romantic partners. And we might judge them for their annoying habits or how they're not meeting our needs and our expectations. Whatever is causing our judgment, the first thing we want to understand is that our perspective is likely very, very limited. In some ways, a judgment is a conclusion that we arrive on based on a certain limited perspective, a very small slice of the full picture. So, for example, you might be listening to me on this podcast, and you might hold a perspective about me. Puja is fill in the blank. Take a moment right now to capture in one or two words how you perceive me with the information you have about me so far. Okay, done. Now let's look at me from another perspective. This is the perspective of my brother who was visiting from India recently, and his perspective is of sitting next to me in the passenger seat as I drive us around in New Jersey on the Garden State Parkway. And I am swearing like a sailor at every single exit that somehow I kept missing. So my brother has a different perspective of me, correct? Both perspectives are true because ultimately human beings are messy, imperfect people that are trying to do the best they can. And what judgment can do is it can put us in boxes, and it forces us to choose between black and white thinking. We can take a sliver of information about a person or a situation, and boom, here's the box, here's the label. Now we're comfortable, now we can breathe. And when some other aspect is revealed to us, we are genuinely shocked. And we want to understand our tendency to box and label. There's a very good reason that we do this. Our brain is not an ordinary machine. So let's look at what causes us to quickly label and box. There's a scientific term for that. In neuroscience, we call this heuristics. And what that means is that the brain will very quickly simplify what it is observing in order to reduce overwhelm. Heuristics are mental shortcuts that are designed to help us solve problems and make judgments quickly and efficiently. This is because our brain processes so much information all day, every day. These statistics are going to blow your mind. The unconscious mind processes 11 million bits of information per second. When we walk from our living room to the kitchen, our brain is processing and sorting through thousands of pieces of information. Our conscious mind, on the other hand, processes 40 bits of information per second. So essentially, what our brain is doing is filtering through, sorting and organizing and labeling tons and tons of information every second in order for us to not drown and to just function and thrive. We want this type of simplification. We don't want to stop at every red light and say, now what do I do, right? We should know that we should stop. We should be able to look at cookies and immediately say, this is sweet. We should look at fire and know immediately that this is dangerous. We don't have the time or the energy to process things repeatedly. It helps for the brain to simplify. Let's look at the example of an airport. We need heuristics to simplify the entire experience of taking a flight. We don't want to be overwhelmed at the airport. We need to know which departure gate to be dropped off at, where to drop off our baggage, where to get our boarding ticket from, how to find the shuttle to get to the correct gate, etc. Another example is this podcast. You are likely listening to it on an app or a software or a browser, and there are actually millions of lines of code underneath the app, underneath the very simple interface that you interact with. You hit the play button and the podcast plays. You hit pause and it pauses. You can bookmark it. You can share it. You can give it a fantastic rating if you like. But you get the idea. Heuristics simplify our life. They are very, very crucial when it comes to developing efficient systems and structures that make our day-to-day life simpler, easier, and more enjoyable. However, when it comes to human beings, heuristics are not very useful because we make our decisions based on heuristics and they tend to be very quick, unconscious, automatic, and error-prone. Heuristics are the reason for our biases and our stereotypes and all our relationship problems. All our human problems begin when our brain uses the little information it has about a person and quickly reduces them into a simplistic label or puts them in a box. So what do we do when it comes to our judgment of other human beings? The first invitation is to practice present moment awareness. This is developed through meditation and mindfulness-based practices. And what it does is it gives us the capacity to slow way down and infuse some intention and mindfulness into our brain's default processing capacity so that we can sincerely try and understand what is happening, what is going on. And that requires us to become aware of our own inner self. And as we feel a judgment arise, and when we slow down and pause and say, I don't want to simplify this. In fact, I want to expand my capacity to really look at this from another perspective and get the bigger picture. One of my favorite mantras for life is a quote from Dr. David Hawkins. And he says, content is linear and context is non-linear. When we perceive and base our judgment on this moment and this time-space reality, that is a very small piece of the big picture. And when it comes to humanity in general, and specifically the people we care about and interact with, we want to try and get as much context as possible. So our first step is to slow down and expand our self-awareness. And this step of slowing down opens up something that is very critical in understanding our own inner workings. It allows us to make contact with our belief systems, the programming that lurks underneath the surface of our judgments. When we pause and dig deeper to unearth those belief systems, often they're rooted in fear, we can ask ourselves if those belief systems are serving us, if they're helping this situation or harming it. Are they making us better human beings or not? And from that place of self-awareness and willingness to expand our perspective, we can then take the next step, which is to understand the difference between monocular and binocular vision. Monocular vision simply means seeing with one eye, while binocular vision is seeing with both eyes together. I came across this concept in relation to relationships in a book called How to Improve Your Marriage Without Talking About It by Patricia Love and Stephen Stosny. The authors talk about the importance of shifting away from monocular vision and developing binocular vision. They give this example of animals in the animal kingdom who have one eye each on the side of their face. Think birds, squirrels, deer, horses. When we observe these animals, you will notice that they tend to move through the world skittish and nervous. Why? Because they just have one side of the picture. They never fully feel safe and stable. And that's what happens to us when we choose to have monocular vision, just our side of the picture. Then there are animals, like human beings, who have both eyes on the front of their face. And what that allows for is for us to have a fuller perspective, a wider range of vision. And that in fact makes us more stable, more steady, and more capable because we are looking at the entirety of the picture. Imagine how much conflict and stress we could avoid if we were simply able and willing to see the whole picture, the full context, and not just the fragment that we see with our limited vision and understanding. So that brings me to the next invitation. After self-awareness and the willingness to cultivate binocular vision, the next thing we can do to reduce judgment is to replace it with curiosity. So I have slowed down. I've unearthed my limiting belief systems. I understand that I don't have the full picture. I'm willing to expand my perspective. And now I would like to know what is going on for the other person. It seems to me that there's a clash of worldviews or opinions. But how about you tell me how you came to cultivate this opinion and this view. How did you get to this place? Would you like to share more with me? I'm sure you have a really good reason for doing what you did or saying what you said. Would you tell me more about it? Now we are showing up as a team player. And we often find that the other person has never maybe been asked to tell their side of their story in this inviting and collaborative way. Typically, we move through life without asking or being asked deep questions about our life and our inner workings. All humans are hungry and aching to share their heart and soul with others who are truly and genuinely interested in them. And if we can sit back and really listen, absorb, observe what is being shared with us, the background, the experiences, the value systems, the worldviews that have shaped this individual, not only does that help us understand them, maybe drop our judgment, even resolve the issue, but I want you to consider what this opens up. There is now a deeper, more soulful connection with this person who just opened up to us. And the richness from this exchange now trickles into our connection and our capacity to be more intimate and vulnerable with each other. Whether that is spiritual intimacy or emotional intimacy, intellectual intimacy, sexual intimacy, something has opened up here that was not open before. It is very simple math. When judgment leaves, love enters. So what do we do about people where we don't get the chance to ask them? The encounters are brief and we don't get to ask the person about their inner workings and their choices. It helps in those circumstances to accept that maybe there is another viewpoint here that we are not seeing. It helps us to assume good intentions with strangers and lovers alike. So let's say a person cuts in front of us on the I-4. Instead of jumping to a conclusion and a judgment that this person is a jerk, what if we said, I wonder what is happening for them right now? I have personally found that when I do that, there are so many possibilities that open up. And those possibilities actually allow my compassionate and kind self to be expressed. Maybe they're driving their pregnant wife to the hospital. Maybe they have an interview after months of being unemployed and they really want to make it on time. If we have to fill in the blanks, why not fill them in with good intentions and good assumptions? Here's why this is important. It honestly doesn't matter why they cut in front of us. It doesn't matter why they said something angrily. It matters how I respond to that and how much of my mental space that encounter, that exchange occupies for me. Does it take up a minute or 5 hours or 3 days? And what helps me feel better is when I extend grace, kindness, and compassion towards the other. We don't always know the full picture, and we might never know, in this case, for example, what someone's motivation or intention is. But we feel better when we choose to assume good intentions. Because when we are choosing a peaceful thought, a thought that is sourced in grace and compassion, guess what we are not choosing? Then we are not choosing a stressful, agitated, frustrated viewpoint and energy. This is efficient mind management. Because with those choices that serve us better, we are more capable and more resourced, both for ourselves and for those around us. And that is a very valuable gift to bring to the table anywhere we go these days. Most people are suffering, they're going through something, and they are also terrified of feeling unsafe in environments, whether those are home environments or work environments or social environments. And our judgments don't always have to be spoken, they can be felt. We can feel when we are in the presence of someone or when we are in a space where judgment is present. Something in us constricts. And when our energy, our presence is one of calm, non-judgment, curiosity, we are energetically sending off a signal, a message that we are a safe space. And for someone to walk through the door who is providing a sense of relief through their presence, they are non-judgmental, they are curious, they are extending grace, they are assuming good intentions, that can be felt so clearly. And it is appreciated so much in this world today. I hope this episode has given you something to reflect on. Is there a possibility for you when you feel a judgment bubble up to pause, to try on another perspective, to be genuinely curious and assume good intentions instead? And can you think of one person who would benefit from today's episode? I would love for you to share it with them. And if you have been enjoying the podcast, please rate and review it on the platform that you're listening on. All right, thank you for listening. Here's to your radiant presence. Until next time.